We are
Oh, we are?
live. Yeah, we are.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. My name's Riker. Karama X or whatever. I don't know. I go by many names. And welcome to the number one show to broadcast every Sunday. And around this time, you're watching Between Two Keepstars. I'm here with my lovely host, Ish, who I'm not going to try to pronounce her name because I tried it and it just didn't work, as well as a few other guests. Jack Neller and an old time show favorite, Dr. Spotamane. Because why not? So
Because
how's
why not?
how's everyone doing?
I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just filling in.
It's a good choice.
What are you coming in for?
Phantomite's on a fleet, so he told me to come and
Oh,
occupy a seat.
I'm
okay.
just I'm just snowed in on this Sunday, so I don't have any other choice but to be here.
Yeah, you
Common
guys
thing, but it
got
seems a
a
bit.
crazy amount of snow over there.
Yeah, like 2.5 feet with 6 foot snow drifts.
Yeah, it's absurd. My brother sent me a picture of it. It's just out of control. No
I
thanks.
I had to find my car by digging it out.
Shit, that just made it worse. Anyway, so how's everyone doing today? Well, not really much has been happening in Eve. We had what's that thing? Oh, my mind just completely shut down. Oh, Snuff got trapped, like badly, and just broke the camera again. Yeah, how's everyone doing?
Doing good.
Not
Cool.
bad, not bad.
So for a little context, on what happened, Snuff, well, the thing that got Snuff trapped in the first place, and I need to stop fucking with this camera, was in frat staging. There was actually a Titan that apparently they were they decided to drop dreads on. They dropped dreads on it. They did it at, I believe, around downtime. So they do it. They don't log in. Frat logs in first, and then now you've got another M2 style hell camp situation where Snuff are the ones that are trapped. So other than that, that's pretty much the only real Eve news. Anyone have thoughts on that?
They had it coming.
I know who would.
Do you mean Phantomite or someone else?
Anyone, honestly.
I mean, as I said I know who would have an opinion on it. Probably one of the guys that was there. That being Phantomite, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if only he were here.
If only.
So yeah, what's been going on in X Staffy land?
Oh, so Fancy Pants Inc. X Dave is our ticker. Yeah, we're just trucking along. We're still kind of in, fattening up our wallets after the Goon War. Everyone's kind of come back home, and we're just kind of turbo crabbing and doing a lot of whaling on the side. We been killing some Rorquals, some supers. We just had a great fight the other day where we were able to lock down 5 or 6 carriers and dreads of snuff alts. They were harassing some new bros. So, I mean, we're just kind of living the life, waiting for the next war to roll around and getting some whaling in to keep us occupied in the meantime.
And an in-house tournament.
Oh yeah, and Ish actually helped organize we do an internal corp tournament. It was a 3v3 round robin tournament that Ish and one of our other corp members, Sim is his name, organized, and is just kind of a feeder for getting the fancy pants AT team up to fighting strength. But I'll let Ish kind of talk about that because that's his specialty.
Well, it's just something for fun. Give people something to do. Arena PvP is a really fun part of Eve, and it was a nice thing to be able to do with the corp, sort of an in-house format. And then like Deck said, kind of get people energized for AT and for Anger Games coming up, which just recently got announced. So I think that's another piece of Eve news. With Anger Games being announced, it is on. We are good to go for Anger Games 5. So I'm looking forward to that. I've taken a look at the rule set. I think it's really nice. I think it'll lead to some really nice sets of meta for this tournament, and it should be good. I'm pumped for it.
Awesome, yeah. So how do you guys, I guess, do that? Or how do you sort the teams? Is it just, hey, get a bunch of people together and they just sort of chill and form a team?
You mean like
It's,
for
it's
Anger
a second
Gamer?
job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, for like AT, it definitely became for Dak and I it was like having a second job for sure. Yeah, we intend to take Anger Games seriously. We know we'll be going up against some formidable opponents, some really strong people. So we intend to do a lot to take that on. So we'll be putting together a pretty good team um, to try and make a serious entry into that. Yeah, get people warmed up, get people into practicing shape. As far as this in-house tournament, it was done, with a captain's draft, and just to get everybody involved and energized for that, and people who aren't familiar with Arena PvP and Eve to kind of get accustomed to that.
Nice. And I don't know what else. I guess is there anything else you got to say about it?
Is there like a
I'm trying to
tournaments for
think of
dummies kind of
questions.
thing? Because I'm not somebody that particularly participates or follows those kind of things quite closely, so it's a bit of a mystery as to how it works, like the points systems, the selection. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
more, could you get a bit more idiot's guide to that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, you go ahead. You should go ahead.
oh, sorry. The basic idea is that it's a lot like in spirit. It's a lot like the small gang PvP you've done in Eve, right? It's just it's a limited engagement. There's a size, so the arena has a size, a sphere, 125 kilometers, and within that sphere, there are some jump units stationed around to kind of give you a feel for the dimensions of that sphere, and also that you can use to take a 100-kilometer jump. And then you engage an opposing team, and every ship has a point value. And then there are additional rules besides, as far as like what mods can be used and things like that, to keep it relatively balanced. So one of the interesting things about a good arena rules format in Eve is that it no longer comes down to the guy who is able to afford the 2 billion-isk pod and the purple mods on his cruiser or whatever the hell else people do. You really, it does come down much more to pilot skill, to planning, to coordination with your team. And I really view it in a lot of ways kind of the peak of Eve PvP, because there's a lot of demand on it and a lot of structure to it. And a lot of the things that we know are just a little bit nonsense in terms of PvP engagement don't quite pan out as well for you or at all in the context of an arena rules tournament.
Yeah, what I really like about Alliance tournaments, whether it be the Anger Games or the official Alliance tournament, or even just for fun tournaments that corps or individual alliances might run, is that there's kind of two ways to play. There's the actual flying in the arena and piloting and engaging, and then before the fight even happens, there's a ton of theory crafting and metagaming of putting fits together and putting comps together, because regardless what tournament you do, they kind of follow the same prescription of each ship is worth a certain amount of points, and each team has X amount of points that they can spend on their fleet comp. So you can't just come in with 10 Lokis or 10 Munins and be boring. You have to have kind of a nice mix of ships, whether support and logi and DPS and tackle, and just kind of making those points work for you and getting the most bang for your buck out of them. It takes a lot of theory crafting and moving pieces around to get that together well.
Okay.
How do you even start practicing that kind of thing? Because like you say, there is the sort of catch that the arena world is very different to the real world. While there's obviously some similarities, you don't necessarily have a known point limit on who's going to come through the gate. So,
Yep.
like, is it one of those things where people organize and scrim together, or is it more
Oh,
to it than that?
definitely. Definitely, yeah. There's a lot of scrimming that happens. I mean, you want to be. It's a balance, right? Because some people want to play a little closer to the chest and like, oh, we don't want anyone to see our comps. We don't want anyone to see the way we fly this or things like that. But that usually doesn't pan out that well for you. And you'll see as the more experienced teams in like alliance tournament things like that, they scrim pretty openly and they scrim pretty regularly. That doesn't mean you're divulging a bunch of secrets. It doesn't mean there's not things you're holding close to the chest. And it doesn't mean you're not being thoughtful about who you pick to scrim, right? You see the bracket well ahead of time. You know who you're fighting earlier rather than later, and you kind of make some choices based on that. But the idea is to get out there and get some practice because you do need to get a feel for flying as a team. You do need to get a feel for that engagement. Knowing the boundaries of that arena is really important, and you need to kind of feel those boundaries, not just think about, oh, it's a sphere. It's you need to really be able to feel where that boundary is and how you can exploit that. So there's a lot to practice and to work on ahead of time. So you definitely see teams putting some serious time into working with other teams, to working within their own team. Hopefully, you can put together a team large enough to kind of in-house scrim, as it were, and do things like that, and that gives you a definite advantage.
Yeah, and you kind of fall into a kind of little circles too. You kind of see what the bracket is. So, oh, these people are on the other side of the bracket of us. So, if we do play them, we're not going to play them until some of the very last rounds. They're probably safe people to scrim against and bounce ideas off of, because you're just not going to play them in the tournament. And we had a couple of alliances like that we scrimmed against them 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times leading up to the tournament. And it'd be like, hey, can you run that comp you ran the other day? We think we developed a counter for it. We want to try it out, and that helps us because we learn how to fly against comps, and it also helps them because they find out what the holes in their comp are and how they might want to patch those holes.
Yep, and there's also a balance too because most tournaments have collusion rules. So while you can definitely get together with a team, you can say, "Hey, let's practice this." Or as soon as we do "Hey, no bans this time. We're just going to practice something specific." Or, "Hey, let's do some kitey comp stuff." That's all very open. What you can't do, of course, is say ahead of time anything that's going to happen in the match, or say, "Oh, here's all our comps and here's what we're doing," and "Oh, we want this team to get knocked out, so work with us to get that team knocked out." Which there has been some of that stuff in the distant past of the AT, unfortunately. That is an unfortunate legacy. It happens in a lot of gaming tournaments, and Eve isn't immune to that. But the good teams and the teams that are out there really to make this a fair and good competition, very mindful of that collusion. But you really build one of the things that surprised me. I think I mentioned this when the AT was going on, is the camaraderie you kind of build with the other teams, and just how welcoming that environment is. We got the privilege to scrim a lot of really experienced teams. Rote Capel and Exodus, and these teams have gone up year after year, and really have a lot of AT experience. And us as a first-time team, it was really humbling and cool to see the welcoming from that side of the community, and their interest in seeing new blood come into these tournaments, and their willingness to scrim and all of that. A lot of the elitism in Eve tends to fall away in these tournament style events. That isn't to say there's none. That isn't to say there aren't still people with their classic attitude that they always carry around. But it's a lot more of a inviting but challenging format for Eve PvP, and that's something I really appreciate about it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking forward to it. It's definitely glad to have it over with because, like we said, it is a second job, especially running an AT team and also running a 800-person corp. It it definitely puts a lot on your plate. So it's a stressful thing. I'm glad it only happens once a year, but I am glad that it happens.
That's quite cool to hear. I imagine people, well, I had imagined that people would guard their comps and secrets pretty closely, but it sounds like people have managed to maturely weigh that up and realize that there is far more advantage to actually playing together. But of course, like you said, you still got to be careful of who you show your cards to.
Oh yeah, and I mean there is still that. I mean there's still, I won't name them, but there are teams where like okay, meet us on the test server 30 jumps away from the nearest move me system. You're going to jump through a wormhole, and then you're going to take 3 chains through the wormhole where we have, a secret arena set up where no one, and it's like, man, I just want to scrim. Can we just scrim?
there are people who wanna push, and take it maybe even too seriously, and also, I mean, like, you can do a lot of things without you can do a lot of things to get valid practice without maybe showing all of your cards, and also you get a feel for what to modify and what to run, and also what you want to bring to each kind of scrim as you get to know an opponent. Okay, they're really uh, we've really just been stomping with this kind of particular comp or something like that, so we want to further develop that. Or maybe we don't want to run that, we want to challenge ourselves with something else, or they're really stomping us with this kind of comp, so we need to be thinking about that. And that does give you information for sure. It gives you valid intel, like, hey, if we're going to face these guys in the whatever tournament it may be, it gives you some intel about how you might take them on. But it also kind of gives you something to work towards and think about what information you're giving to others and what you're doing in those scrims. Is it really good preparation time? Is it making you tight at running these comps? And the final piece I'll say is that this stuff isn't like always like a 10,000 IQ thing. There's certain things that are just kind of timeless and work. They're just, very traditionally going to work out. You have certain things like, Sleipnir rush comps and, things like this in kiting missile comps that typically fare pretty well. So it's really about further developing that edge and the coordination you can get between your team. The best teams, the teams you see taking home the big prizes, the Hydra, the Vidra, and groups like that, and Tuskers and what have you, uh, it's not just because of some secret comp they came up with or a special super secret fit. It has a lot to do with their piloting skill, their coordination, their FC calls, and their awareness. And it's really in that way like a microcosm of Eve, right? It's not about the best fits or the best doctrines don't always win. It's about really what you can do on that field.
Yeah, I would definitely say piloting skill is the number one, virtue that decides matches. It's just every once in a while you'll come across a match that gets decided in the band selection. You get both fleets on field with each other, and you're like, yep, this is gonna be a slaughter. And that's also what it comes down to is, you could come up with like the smartest comp ever, but if it gets banned, it doesn't matter. Or, it could get hard countered and it doesn't matter. So you just gotta kind of take your licks with it as well sometimes.
I mean, we saw it happen multiple times during the last AT, so it just shit happens, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, there's really nothing you can do.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, it definitely can happen. So what'll be interesting about Anger Games coming up is unlike the AT, it's a 7v7 versus 10v10 format. So this means each ship to that point, it matters a bit more. Each of those pilots on there, you have less to work with. You have less robustness within your fleet, within your team, that you can work out in that arena. You also have some additional interesting rules. Like, for example, there's a increasing point cost for repeated hauls. So if I bring one jackdaw, it's, I think, without looking, I think it's like 7 points or something like that. And if I bring the second jackdaw, it's 8 points. And the third jackdaw would be 9 points. So you really have to start forcing some diversity, and you sit there poring over the ships and Pyfa and thinking about what can I get, what strengths can I play to without making this thing that feels like a kitchen sink hodgepodge fleet, and get the best use out of my point values. So I'm looking forward to some diversity that's going to come out of this Anger Games tournament, which takes place, by the way, towards the end of May and June, early part of June.
yeah. No, I'm, I also want to, yeah, I also want to see what's going to happen, see how it's going to be streamed. I get, again, I'm excited to see what people are going to do, how it's going to differ from the Alliance tournament, and who's going to come out on top.
Indeed. So,
So I guess what else is happening in New Eden? We've got the
Besides
that
Snuff,
whole thing going on.
yeah, we had Snuff being camped. It's been a slow week. It feels like. Maybe it just feels like it to me. Been a little insulated this week from mainline Eve action, doing stuff with the corp for this in-house tournament, but it just doesn't feel like there's been a whole lot of news. Eve subreddit filled with the usual complaining about bad user interface or what to do with the Gila. So no juicy things to draw out there.
Yeah, everything's been kind of quiet, which I mean it's just how things are. You know, sometimes we get weeks where there's just not a lot of news. Like there's a lot of like what feels like boiling points and like what's it called? My mind just totally blanked. Boiling pots, right? Like what's an area called when like a conflict could easily kick off?
A flashpoint.
Yeah, thank you. Like
Or a
there seems
powder
to be quite a
keg.
couple. How both those work, but there definitely seems to be a couple of flashpoints around you that could potentially, heat up, but there's just nothing happening.
Well, there is so Alice in Twitch chat did point out Cloud Ring, and indeed we do have try losing ever increasing amounts of space. You know that started beginning of this month really, but ever increasing amount of space. The real winners here are slow children who have just been increasingly picking up. I don't know how long they're going to really be able to stick with this, but they've been picking up increasing amounts. Bastion flipped back and forth, so that's kind of interesting. That happened this week. Bastion lost XT and or they gained it and then lost it this week. Lost it the next day, so I think they were trying to maybe step into that arena, but not very successfully.
Yeah.
But yeah, Try continues to crumble as Try is known to do. They never quite go away, but they crumble on the regular.
Hey, speaking of crumbling, we've got Dynamite here. Tell us about Snuff's Dread Fleet.
Well, do you know what? I completely unrelated, but how many anchored bubbles did CCP regard to be an exploit about a year and a half ago?
I think it really had to do with the using bubbles specifically to degrade the node. So I don't think there was ever a real call about quantity of bubbles. Are you saying you may have pushed? You may have encroached upon that boundary today.
No, I think what he's saying is that fire has encroached, or not fire. The pandas have encroached on that.
There certainly are an incredibly large amount of bubbles now. I think it's pretty safe and boring for me to say that the number of dreads trapped that a lot of prominent Snuff members are saying that there are, and the number of dreads trapped that Fraternity is saying that there are, the real number is probably somewhere in between those numbers. Definitely not like 170. And I would guess, given that I wasn't attending that fleet, that it's probably more than 20.
Probably more than 20. Okay.
But they're expensive, right?
20.
20 dreads.
Go
Yeah,
on.
I mean, 20
Go on.
dreads. That's like what's that, like 100 bill, including fittings?
Yeah, with the current prices.
Yeah, I mean,
And-
let's say it. Let's just for the benefit of the doubt say that it's 40 dreads. So I mean, that's going to be like 200 billion isk currently trapped in there. But I know it's somewhat self-serving to say this, but one group out there's got to have some balls. So how about it be Snuff?
Oh
I mean,
boy.
it seems with this whole dread situation, they put their nuts on the table only to have it chopped off.
Well, it's
Well,
more.
the knife is hanging over them.
Yeah,
it's
the,
more-
the knife is very much like on it's over then. It's like a guillotine.
Actually,
that
do you know what?
doesn't
Let's
come
say
down
it's not a knife, but it's like 1,000 toothpicks. Should we say that instead?
yet. 1,000 toothpicks. Okay.
Well, it's getting to the point where with the way industry is looking, it's just not worth it to dread bomb anymore. You know, if you don't get that initial kill, and now it's not even if you don't get a super. You know, like you said, you have what 140 billion worth of dreads tied up now. You know, that's a Titan's worth. If you didn't kill a Titan, you're actually kind of is negative.
And even with the escalated price of super capital ships, I mean, there is also a hugely escalated price of regular capitals like dreads as well. So it hasn't really made um, dreads versus supers be particularly much better value.
Yeah, it's the math just isn't working out anymore, and it's not like people are going to start dread bombing with like a bunch of battleships. So, is dread bombs just going to stop existing? You
Just
know,
you wait. It's gonna happen.
I remember what was it 3 4 years ago now when CCP was promising those like heavy bombers, like the bombers specifically
No,
for blowing up
no.
supers.
No. Any anti-super capitals, sub capitals is a terrible, terrible method of balancing supers.
I mean, ultimately, I would like dread prices to come down. Like, I'm fine
I
with.
think that's the best thing to say. That's a balance. That's the most reasonable view of it because dread prices coming down enables them to be the anti-super capital
That's what they
ship
were
without
supposed to
having to
be.
invent something new. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it also allows them to also be the anti-dread ship, which means dread brawls if they came down in price. Honestly, a fitted dread. This might sound a little bit drastic. A fitted dread, in my mind, should be half the price that it is now.
I don't know about half, but I would take less. There was a point where Dread Throwaway was getting absolutely obscene, and then not long after that at all, Dread prices became obscene, and we got something like we got like some really good Dread fights, and then just an utter dearth of them. And I'd also like to see some of these smaller alliances be able to do some meaningful things with Dreads, because there's a lot of stuff you can do as a small group if you just get a few Dreads together. I'm talking to the numbers like 8, 10, 12 Dreads.
Yeah,
You know, where you can
especially with
actually
some high angle weapons.
yeah, exactly. Drop like 12 Hall Dreads and things like that. But right now, for small alliances, the ISK churn on getting those fit out and then throwing them away,
Yeah,
it's
I mean it's
intense.
because of the price of the Tech 2 guns for dreads, which are now a necessity for
Mm-hmm.
anybody trying to punch above their weight rather than blob. With the price of those guns, and I know that they've been this price for ages.
Well,
It,
the
it
reason why the price is there for the T2 guns is because it's not worth putting T1 guns on a a 4 billion hull.
Well, that depends. It depends what kind of skill level your pilots are and how many of them you have. If you are capable of just blobbing relatively blobbing the enemy, then it's not worth putting T2 guns
Well, no.
on.
In Pandemic Horde, we require T2 guns on our dreads. Like Pandemic Horde is probably one of the biggest blobs in the entire game, and they're requiring T2
Yes, but
guns.
when I say blob, I mean relative to whatever fleet you're attacking.
Well, that's the Eve definition of blob. Anyone who
Yeah,
brought more numbers
blob
than
is
you.
not a set number; it's a relative figure. But yeah, I mean, like one battleship attacking a cruiser is blobbing that cruiser. Well, no, actually, it depends on the battleship, doesn't it? Some of them would just die to a cruiser, wouldn't they? Like a rock. A rock doesn't have much tracking on board.
I feel dread hulls should be about 2 billion. Pirate battleships should be about 1 billion, and T1 battleships should be about 500 million. Like I feel that is the healthy
T1
progression.
battleships should be half a billion isk.
Yeah, because
Okay.
because
Wow.
because the
So
buffs that
you
they're
mean that it will? You mean if T1 battleship hulls were half a billion, they would never be flown, given that a pirate battleship hull, many of which are brilliant for fleet work, are only twice as much.
well, you also have to keep in mind that CCP also wants to buff T1 battleships. They've said it, numerous times, including in the most recent interview on declarations of war. They want to buff the T1 battleships, and I agree. Like the T1 battleships are not powerful enough. I think 500,000 ISK or 500 million ISK for a T1
Well, that's
battleship
relative as well.
is acceptable, but you also have to beef up the T1 battleships, which they should because it's a battleship. Like I remember when I started playing Eve, my goal was like, oh, I want to get in a battleship. You sank my
Yeah.
battleship. That was my perspective, and I think that is healthy for Eve. That battleship should be expensive, but they should have a power level to match that expense. They shouldn't just be large battle cruisers.
Well, they're not. I feel like T1 battleships should be closer to the 200 mil mark, which is drastically below
If
what
you
you
do,
feel they should be. I
if
would
you do
want
that,
T1 battleships to offer reasonable value proposition versus pirate battleships, and 500 mil for a T1 battleship versus a bill for a pirate battleship is not a good value proposition for T1 BS.
yeah, but then you're squeezing way too much on the lower end. Like you're moving the slider down, forcing people into larger ships. Like that's the problem. Like CCP complained one of the biggest problems with the capital meta that we had leading into the shit show we have now is that anything smaller than a carrier didn't matter. CCP has a whole suite of very
Well,
cool
that's a
ships.
problem with carriers, though, isn't it?
Well, no, I'm
That's a
just
problem
using
with
that.
the versatility of carriers and
I'm
their
just using that.
utility.
Hold
and
on, don't change the
DPS.
subject. Don't change the subject.
Well, you brought them
That's
in and tried to
that
compare them. I'm
just
saying you
using
can't
that.
compare
Hold
them.
on, let me finish my point. The whole thing is CCP has rifters and all of these cool ships that just don't get used because there's no point to them. They want to go back and actually have an ability for players to fly T1 ships and not just get laughed out of space. And that's where we're at now. Like the only people running T1 frigates or T1 destroyers are either people doing suicide fleets or complete new bros. And
Well, in nullsec, yes.
well, CCP wants for there to be spaces for all of these ships to be flown, and right now there isn't. And by lowering the scale down so much, like what you want, like 200 million-esque battleships, you're not giving enough breathing room for those lower tier ships.
Well, no, I'd want those to be a bit cheaper as well.
What, free? Like how much cheaper can it really get?
Well,
Sorry,
now
this
you're
isn't
talking about a
this
sliding
isn't
scale
a
on
binary
economy.
decision between 75 mil for a battle cruiser and 0 ISK. There are numbers in between.
Yeah, but you have to balance all this against the ISK generation economy, which is not in a good state right
Which
now.
has
But
also taken a hit.
of course, of course.
Yeah.
But talking about like the 200 mil price point, if you put that in perspective for most people's ISK generation, you've taken battleships to like a cruiser level of throwaway. I think the real sin on the sub-capital side, of course, has been the pervasiveness and the build-up and the infinite buffs to the hack meta, and that's really done more to damage anything battle cruiser and below than any other change to the game. As far as battleships
I don't think you're
go,
going to have any resistance to that idea. I think we're all on board with that.
yeah, I didn't think that was gonna be a controversial opinion. I think the problem with battleships is in the modern period of Eve warfare and the modern way that fleets tend to be run, they never really got the chance to shine, right? Because by the time they came in,
get the chance to shine.
battleships. So
Okay,
by the
when
time
did you start playing?
So I started playing early 2014. But when I talk about modern, when I talk about modern era,
which was when before that was the last time battleships were actually relevant.
Exactly. Exactly. So when I came in, battleships were on their way out. That's just the reality. And that when I talk about a modern era, I really mean like let's say like 2015 and beyond, and I'm talking more about the meta changes of players more than even a change instated in the game.
Yeah, I think that's a good spot because that's right when Citadels came in. And
exactly.
I feel that is kind of like that's the BC/AD split of
yes,
Eve,
exactly.
Before Citadels, after Citadels.
I didn't realize in this channel are we you mentioned Citadels. Are we playing Don't Get Me Started?
Yeah, well, we won't go. We won't go Fozzie soft today. We won't go Fozzie soft.
What's the topic of discussion? What are you guys whining about today?
What aren't we whining about?
There are multiple aspects around the hack meta, which are not just limited to the hacks and the guns themselves. There are multiple issues around here, and one of the issues that we don't often mention is the lack of situations where the game can develop close range combat requirements. a huge part of this, not the whole story, but a huge part of this is the sheer size and radius of structures like citadels. What the game really needs is more situations where you are closer than about 50 kilometers from each other.
So
And merely having the situations where you are driven closer together is by itself one important piece of the puzzle to making battleships more viable.
So you basically want it where a bunch of people land at 0 and just start beating the fuck out of each other? 'Cause
Wait,
that's-
hold on. What do you mean, dude? Like battleships are like one of the best comps to fight at range. What? Like APOC navies, dude, beam lasers, 150 km plus. RDs on Tempest, like 160 km plus.
Are you arguing this because you're looking at numbers in EFT or because you have actual experience?
Because I have actual experience from the past 13 years that I've been FCing in this game.
Oh, okay, then. Well, if we're doing that, I'm going to one-up you with 14.
That's fine. I've flown every doctrine known to man except Serbs, because Serbs are trash and all of Caldari is trash. And if you fly Caldari and are Caldari, you are trash.
Hold on. So we've just had the simultaneous statements: all Caldari battleships are trash, and battleships are amazing.
No. I said all Caldari is trash. All Caldari. I didn't say specifically battleship. I said all Caldari.
Okay, so it's not unfair for me to say all Caldari, including the Rock.
I said all Caldari flat out.
So
like, if you fly Leviathan, no, just get out of the game. Quit the game.
So let me get this clear.
What are you going to do?
Wait.
Siege at Keepstar?
Wait.
Best ship in the game.
Let me just get this right. You are saying that all Caldari ships are trash and battleships are brilliant at range.
I think we can all agree.
I
think we can all agree that Spicy does not have very much intuition on the current state of the game.
Hold on. So what you're really saying is I'm racist, and I will agree. Yes, I am racist towards Caldari.
Well,
I hate Caldari. Hate Caldari out of my face.
You can hate the Caldari people and still respect the ships. Caldari aren't my favorite
I hate
ships,
all
but...
Caldari. Period. End of story. Anything Caldari, like Minmatar. Minmatar are the slaves of Omar. Get out of here.
You just hate winners is what your problem is.
No. So guess what? Munin wins. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Well, yeah, because the Munin is the most overtuned ship in the game, and it makes no sense to.
Well, no, because like it's like Munin... literally like you're shooting at it, right? And it's ragtag like put together because the Minmatar like just duct tape their shit together, and like the bullets fly through the duct tape, right? Like. You don't actually do damage. You just kind of like blow little Munin pieces everywhere.
I'm lost. I'm lost whether we're actually having a debate about actual stats of the game and the actual meta, or we're just doing personal preferences at this point.
I don't know either, but I kind of like it.
The point I was trying to make is that if the game had situations where people would be fighting much closer together than beyond 70 to 150, then battleships would immediately start to become more viable.
See,
immediately you brought in battleships are amazing at long range, which wasn't what I was talking about at all.
See, I can actually see that, but in a different way. You know, CCP has said constantly that there's a huge problem with speed creep in the game, constantly increasing the speeds, and it's why, we have such an unbalance with the kitey meta and, battleships being kind of crummy. And it's just, I feel an easy solution that I would like to see them try out is double the range of all weapon systems. Double blasters, double artillery, double everything, and
if you hear something wet, I'm being sick onto my microphone.
Double the range. The problem that we don't have these brawly battleship fights anymore is because of things like the Munin meta and things just being so fast. By doubling the range of everything, you increase the sphere of what a brawl is.
But if you double the range of everything, isn't it just the same problem, only the numbers in your overview are twice as big?
Actually, no. Well, if you double the range of everything, then a lot of physical items in the game, Celestials, also get half the size.
Right, exactly. And then also it's also a reaction speed thing, because like the other solution people say is like, oh, well, why don't you just go around in half the speed of everything? Well, that isn't a perfect answer either, because you have things like actual, live reaction time, maybe not so much in like a tie-dye situation.
And also as speeds go up, server load does as well, because of the way the prediction physics works for velocities.
Right. So I mean, I'll take having speeds as a distant second, but I would much prefer instead doubling the range of all weapons.
So are you implying that we would also double the range of all electronic warfare as well?
Yeah, scrams, disruptor, like double
I mean,
the
this
range of
basically
all of
does
them.
nothing. We could just make celestial objects smaller, and this would accomplish the same thing.
It wouldn't know. It's not that because you're talking about being on grid with someone and they're burning at 3,000 meters a second. That's a very big difference. If your guns can now shoot twice as fast, they have to fly twice as far before they get out of your range.
Or we could just start looking at the collection of attributes that makes the Munin hugely overpowered, such as the fact that it has the Premier Alpha system, it has incredible damage choice, it has incredible speed, it has a great resist profile, and it also has the ADC. And that's before we go on to any other things. If we could just tweak away some of those advantages, then
Why don't
we've
we just rip
taken a
the
much
ADC out of the
lighter view.
game?
I'll tell you what, I hate special case modules. I think that it goes against the spirit of EVE Online's customizability. If I think I don't think that special case one type of use modules are very good for the game. And I think that the ADC is one particular example
So
of
you
that.
think
So
you think dictors are bad too then?
no, I think that generally special case modules are a bad idea in the way that they've been executed, such as things that are quite general but specific use modules like the ADC. The interdictor bubble does one thing, and using player skill and intuition can be used on quite a range of effectiveness based on intelligence and planning. The ADC is kind of dumb in the way it's designed.
I think the ADC is just like a shitty fucking.
It's a band-aid.
Yeah, like it's like I feel like they were like, oh, there's too many like battleship brawls going on, but let's use hacks now. Ha ha ha. ADC.
Well,
I
it's
mean,
almost
maybe
like
the ADC should just be limited to assault frigates, and then I can hate on it there, and I can get rid of it from assault frigates as well.
No, but then assault frigates are gonna be hyper overpowered.
They already have it.
Exactly. See. Have you ever flown a wolf fleet, dude? That shit's deadly.
Yeah.
But no, like actually, like if they just change the ADC or tweak the ADC so like it's not an instant, you're alphaing me, but I'll survive, no big deal, whatever, right? Then like you might see more fleet comps, but it's like you get on field with another fleet, it's kill Logi, so that they can't rep through the ADC, and then it's kill command ships and then kill like the
well,
rest.
if you get rid of the ADC, like what is a assault cruiser now though? Like what actually sets it apart from anything different? Why would you actually run them? Like that's always the biggest problem.
Speed. It's Tech 2 resists. It's specialization very often for range on quite a number of them.
I think I could get behind stripping or heavily modifying the ADC. I think there would still be a place for assault cruisers. I don't know that one change is enough to really take a serious step down from the extreme long range Eagle Munin meta, and that'd be my concern about lengthening the if we talk about doubling the range of weapon systems, whatever.
What do you mean?
I don't think that would be enough to actually
So if
put
we
a
just
serious.
if we ripped the ADC out of the game, right? Just absolutely just you know what? No more ADC. Okay, for hacks only. Like hacks literally lose the only reason they're flown. Like yes, they have range, they have the ability to alpha, they have all these other abilities, right? They have speed, but then like now you don't have an instant capital tank or a.
I mean, perhaps the answer here is that hacks simply need quite a heavy lock range nerf so that they have to use their mids and fill them with sensor boosters if they still want to be at that range.
I mean, I'm also totally fine with just like nerfing ADCs out of the game for a bit because I feel the EVE meta is in cycles. Different ships have their different times in the sun. You know, there was a time in the game when the Archon was the best ship to fly, and now look at it now. So, I mean, if things come and go, I think that's also fine, and we don't necessarily need to, find a replacement for hacks. We can just nerf them into the ground and let something else have its time in the
In a
sun.
perfect world, everything would be viable.
I really don't.
We
like
need
what
to go
you just...
through cycles. We need to go through. We can't have everything always be completely perfectly viable. So what we really need is for things to go through in cycles of usefulness a lot faster than they have done over the last few years.
Well,
I wanna reference something that you just said. That I didn't really like because I feel like you're attacking your Amarian overlords by saying that Archon is not good anymore. So I need you to retract that statement, please.
I'm gonna leave it for the record, but
Oh,
I mean,
no.
in
You
a
did
in a
say please.
in a
I
perfect
did say
game,
please.
in a perfect game mode, you would have sort of a rock paper scissors type meta where you have the meta constantly rotating because when one thing gets popular, you adopt
Ah,
rock
yes.
and then you switch, and I think that's
Rotating like it does in rock paper scissors. Remember
yeah,
that year where scissors was just so OP?
So and that brings me back to the age-old point that I will always say, right? For the first World War B, the Casino War, whatever the fuck you wanted to call it back in the day, right? When you had that rock paper scissors meta that went you undocked fucking Max, they undock T3Cs. You undock T3Cs, they undock T3Cs or Max or something else. And then you had Canes, Feroxes, and all these other ships that you could fly that were all very, very viable, very, very easy to fly. And it was like they strayed away from that, and they nerfed the T3Cs into the fucking ground. Turbo nerfed them.
Yep.
I miss them, but they were far too generally good.
Well,
at the time.
that's the whole point, right? They
Yeah.
were a force multiplier for small groups to use. Therefore, like back in the day, PLNC, right? Like
Well, they're a
on the
force
siege of,
multiplier until the big guys start using them.
I mean, there's still a force multiplier at that point. You know what I mean? Like
Well, it's
that just because the big guys are using them doesn't make their ability to stop being a force multiplier a thing, right? Like they're
right.
still a force multiplier. But now the big guys are using them to counter other people that are big also, and then also shit on
And
the little
that's
guy.
not.
But
Yeah,
nobody
that's
cares
not
about the little
fixable.
guy.
That's not fixable by like ship nerfs and ship buffs. That problem you're talking about, where a force multiplier starts to be
Well,
employed by large and larger
technically
groups.
it is. Actually, it technically is if we've got a few minutes to indulge me here, which we might not.
Well, I do not. I have to go take a fleet out.
I I am willing to indulge. We're all willing to indulge. But first, I'm going to drag us to the other channels of the Discord overlay thing works so people know who's talking and they know who they can get angry at. There we go. Yeah, we were in the wrong channel.
You guys have a good show.
Thanks, Spicy. Thanks for dropping in. Adding some spicy as always.
Adding the fact that you guys bow down to the Amarian overlords, yeah.
Good luck on the fleet. Send us a BR so we can salt about it.
Yeah, I will. Later.
All right, so you're gonna fix the problem of n+1 overpowering through a ship module or through a ship buff or nerf. So let's hear it.
I'm going to make it better. And this used to be the case, maybe around the 2014 era, give or take a couple of years in each direction. And it comes down to several things, including alliance, fleet-based income, combat-based income, and the current methods of income that we have now. Now, the issue that we have these days is that expensive fleet ships, everybody uses them, no matter what size group they are. It was once the case where people who were managing with fewer people were able to get an upper hand by, let's use an example, by flying the Golden Fleet. Are you aware of the Golden Fleet?
Yeah, of course.
So the Golden Fleet, those ships, in comparison with regular Tech 1 ships, are noticeably more expensive. Usually at least 4 times more expensive, including fits, maybe up to 10 times more expensive, depending on how pimp you're making them. And one of the reasons that the Golden Fleet was used against were flying Tech 1 ships instead, rather than just flying the Golden Fleet themselves, but in greater numbers, is because there were a number of aspects in the game for fleet combat based income. Now, obviously, and I don't want to go into the pros and cons and mechanics of passive moons, but a passive moon was basically largely a set amount of ISK. It was not mined by people who needed paying or needed to take a cut to entice them to do the work. What it meant was, let's say you had 10 moons, you got 10 moons worth of income. Passive moons were a combat-based income because it was combat that kept them making money for you. It was fleet combat. And the income, given that all it needed was fueling and collecting, could be done by a far smaller number of people, or at the very least a far smaller number of characters to obtain the money from that thing. Now, what you could do with those was, because it was a set amount of income, because there are a finite number of those moons, is you could, through SRP, you could outfit your guys with more expensive ships if you had fewer guys. It didn't just scale. A passive moon couldn't just give an infinitely growing number of people that same level of SRP. So what it created was, if you had just a massive blob of people, the money, it didn't stretch as far. Are you with me?
I'm with you.
Yeah. Now, what happened is, as those changed to be active mining, alliances needed a different kind of income, and through taxes on ratting and people mining both anomalies and the moons, the way to make money simply became just get as many nerds as possible doing PvE, which is something that scales not infinitely but hugely a lot further than passive moons did.
Right.
And so what this does is, because the method of income scales with the number of people you've got, it equalized everybody in PvP affordability, which made these ships just attainable arbitrarily by everybody simultaneously. Basically, if we went back to a finite combat-based income method for alliances like passive moons used to be, then PvP, fleet PvP as your profession in the game, is capable of making a return.
The problem with that, though, is it causes a different type of stagnation, because if you return to that method, you never get any new actors into the game, because it just becomes true as the cartel.
That wasn't true in low-sec. In low-sec, we traded moons endlessly back in the heyday.
Okay, but I'm talking about null-sec, though. Like, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, low-sec, nothing's going on in low-sec now, but you're talking about, killing null-sec to save low-sec.
I'm not talking about killing nullsec. I'm talking about alliances being able to use PvP as a method of securing income, instead of how many nerds can we squeeze into this region ratting at the same time.
Yeah, and I agree. That's an important thing to have. I don't think returning moons to the days of POS is the answer there. Like, I was hoping that was going to be what was going to be the keys that CCP announced. You could get the ESS keys, and you could get a fleet together, and you could go rob a bank, and then someone at CCP was smoking crack and decided that for some reason they wanted to cap the keys at 1.5 billion ISK, making it just not worth the effort. I think if you want to have a combat-based focused alliance, the number one thing CCP can do is take the cap off of the ESS keys.
Absolutely. I think that's the most viable change for where we are. I'm not completely close to.
That'll work for a few weeks until they're all depleted, and then they'll be kept at a low level.
No, look at the powerhouse ratters of Frat and Goons.
I don't want to look at mass ratting as the future of EVE in any way whatsoever.
It doesn't matter about the future; it's the reality of the present. Those banks are getting replenished. It doesn't have to be the reality of
the present if we change that.
Those banks are being replenished. You're not going to deplete the banks and have them go for forever. And because I almost feel also that the ESS should be kind of tied to SOV in a little bit, like in order to take
ADMs.
this. Yeah, in order to like take the SOV or the ADM of the area, you need to deplete the ESS bank so that you're like robbing the wealth of the system as you're conquering it. That to me, from a flavor standpoint, makes a lot of sense as well. But I feel that's the number one way that you can actually encourage actual combat-based economy and combat-based, building of alliances.
ESS is where CCP's chance to actually cause conflict and tension around the ratting activity. And about that ratting activity, I understand your objection to the current meta, the now long time meta, of just how many people can you cram into a ratting pocket. Realistically, that's not going to change. It's not going to change for a few reasons. One, it directly
Well,
makes
we say
CCP
that.
money. I don't see it changing.
It directly goes against human nature.
It directly makes CCP
No,
money. There are people who enjoy
I
it.
do not want to hear the human nature creates blobs bollocks. That is absolute.
You don't want to hear the truth. You don't want to hear the truth.
It is absolute trash reasoning for implying that there's nothing we can do about it. It is human nature, but CCP doesn't have to endlessly encourage it through game mechanics.
The game mechanics they'll encourage are going to be the ones that get them the kind of players who are going to put money into the game. We can talk about idealisms of
65,000
CCP
people was a PCU during the PvP era of the game.
For the last 3 years, CCP has been doing everything in its power to discourage the blob. Every mechanic they've introduced has been to discourage the blob. And yet, look at that, we're still in blobs. We are still in blobs.
What they have done is they have nerfed the things that the blobs used to sustain themselves, but they haven't buffed anything in the other direction. So they've left everybody with nothing.
What do you mean?
Instead.
Look at the bounty modification. If you're in a blob, your bounties go down. If you're off ratting by yourself, your bounties are through the roof. That is a nerf to the blob and a buff to individual players, and yet we don't see anyone splitting off of the blob. No one's going off to
instead we just see people quitting the game.
No one's going to Great Wildland. Yeah, exactly. So you can't just like buff and expect people to go against human nature. You have to accept
the human
this
nature
is just like
again.
This is just
Yes,
like the
because it's the
T3Cs
truth.
earlier. This is just like the
It is the
T3Cs
truth,
earlier. When the
is the
T3Cs
truth of
were this force multiplier for the smaller groups, and then, as you mentioned, larger groups started using them too. And you rightly said, that doesn't make them not a force multiplier anymore. Anytime you do something to this game that is going
has
to...
a force multiplier, then it is just the force. It's not a multiplier.
Sure, fine. But every time you introduce something to this game that gives any set people an advantage, there will be people who cooperate together and look at how they can scale that. Eve is a game of scale.
I talked about the acquisition differences between those people. Smaller numbers of people can make more money from something. That's the way it was.
No, because all that does is you have those small numbers of people leading the masses. That's not discouraging the blob. That's discouraging.
Yes, but to lead the masses, you need the resources to support them.
Yeah, so exactly. So all yours would do is, instead of the individual players having money, you would give it to the alliance heads. Yeah, I'm sure the alliance heads would love for POS mining to come back, because they would get all the money from the moons and they wouldn't have to set up all these, mining structures and make free ported moons for their members to mine so they can get the, industry taxes. It just, all getting rid of POS mooning did was put the money into the hands of the individual players, and I'm for that.
Oh, good grief. Yeah, but it also destroyed activity in this game, encouraged massive alt creation, and encouraged turtling up into the blobs.
You cannot say it destroyed activity. Like, that is such a broad stroke for something. You cannot attribute it to that.
No, I am absolutely willing to say that. In comparison to how things used to be, it destroyed activity.
I could say the declining interest in MMORPGs destroyed the activity. Like, yeah,
there's a lot of things you can say. Eve has been a dying game since its first day, so this is a constant cycle we see. Now, for sure, membership, active players, down in the past, we'll say rolling 14 to 15 months. actual player base and actual money vested into the game, there is zero question that that has only gone up over the past several years. Like CCP's own released metrics say it, Pearl Abyss's metrics say it. We have a lot of things pointing us to it. ESI taps, people watching player activity say it. That's just a reality. What is destroying for some people the nature of this game is their connection point to what they feel is viable PvP, and sometimes it's emotional and incorrect. Sometimes it's very rational and super correct, as some of the points you've brought out here and on other times, Phantomite. And then sometimes it is a little bit of both. And it's usually, I'll say, that latter category. There is always an emotional attachment we have to this game because of its complexity, because of its richness, and because, quite frankly, its lack of competition. But to say like that, well, we should engineer the entire game to somehow undo the concept of the blob, that either leads to Eve 2 Overwatch version, or Apex Legends version, or insert game name here version, or it just leads to a complete shambling mess, because people will always coordinate into larger and larger groups. They will consolidate those power bases because it's easier to do.
Limited numbers of resources meant that the people who could take control of them with fewer people did better and could be elevated above everybody else. It is also a fact that the optimum way for large groups to make money is just to endlessly keep getting more and more.
So you want to go back to a time of elitism though? Like that was a shitty time in Eve where you had a.
No, it wasn't.
Oh my god!
No, it wasn't.
You want. All you want is to have the power to reject people and tell them your kill board isn't good enough to join us. Frankly, I'm not for that. I'm for a democratic version of Eve
that is
where people can play.
Straw man argument
where
about
people,
what
a straw man
telling me what I mean about something. That is wild.
You are literally saying you want a small group of players to have all of the money so they can decide
so tell me,
happens.
How is this small group of players holding on to all that money by themselves?
By taking that money and investing it into a massive super fleet, aka how PL was PL was the dominant force in the game for years. They had a ton of money and they had the biggest super fleet, and they pushed everyone else around and were super elitist about it, and you had to have pristine kill boards and be vouched in, and it was how Eve got its reputation of being a game full of shitty people.
Yeah, we went to 25,000 people being online instead of 65,000 people going online with your paradigm.
I much prefer a group of good people that I can log on and have a fun time with and have some laughs, and we can blow some ships up and go pew pew. That is much better to me. I'm much happier with playing Eve now than ever in the sweaty neckbeard era of Eve Online.
I don't think it's
people trying hard and having better tactics than everybody is the try hard era, is it, rather than the tactically interesting era with more than double the number of players playing the game simultaneously and far more things happening with more regularity in the game. But no, having two power blocks staring at each other from opposite sides of the galaxy is definitely a much better.
I think it's really strange that you think passive moons alone would undo the two power blocks staring at each other.
Yeah, by bringing back passive moons, all you're doing is solidifying those two power blocks.
Maybe at this stage, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try.
Yeah, I mean, well, when you look at it too, you had stuff like Goon, you had the massive power block that was Goon Swarm back in the day, and how they would go and they completely fucked PL in the Battle of BTAC-R, and that was during quote unquote the good old days. So it was only this whole elitist these small elite groups being on top, that was doomed. That was doomed to fail from the start. Because you had all these smaller groups that said, hey, we're going to get together because fuck the big guys and we want to murder them.
Well, there has to be mechanic and space within the game for that to happen. And CCP would enormously restrict that with just a straight return to a passive moon system. Especially, you got to remember, when passive moons really meant something, Fozzy Sov and Citadel structure didn't actually exist. So there's a lot of hand-in-hand economic changes, and one of the sins CCP has routinely committed over the years and years of Eve's existence is making big sweeping changes with no incrementalism and no consideration for regression testing or regression itself. They've backpedaled some tests, they've backpedaled some changes to be sure, but they haven't really had an incremental and a regressive or progressive push and pull approach that you see out of a lot of successful game franchises. And I know I preach on that frequently, but I can't say it enough. It's extremely true. So if you want to talk about poking around in the economy to try to benefit the little guy, which I'm always a fan of, if you want to talk about how you can consolidate power and be a meaningful presence in the game with less group of people and defy the blob, I'm a huge fan of all of that. But to say making a sweeping change to its economic systems is going to be the right way to institute that, I think history teaches us drastically otherwise.
I feel the only real changes that you could implement that would actually knock the blob down are changes that are so miserable it would encourage people to just not play instead. You know, you could.
And honestly, that's fear mongering. The game more than ever needs an absolute revolution in mechanics, more than it has ever done.
I mean, that's not what I'm saying, but okay. So what I'm saying is that, you know, you could introduce things like decaying structures. You could introduce things like limiting the space of capitals, where only X number of capitals can dock in a citadel. But then that would encourage people to just set up more citadels, which would be a bigger pain in the ass of logistics to manage. And it eventually gets to the point where everyone, it just does, it's not worth it. It becomes a second job, and it's just not worth your time, and it stops being a game. And you know, you also have to be okay with the fact that the game marches forward, and we don't just want to go back to some quote unquote golden age of how it was before. I would rather make a new golden age that's even better. Maybe it's completely different from how it was before, but that doesn't mean we can be stuck in the past on it. And it doesn't mean we can make this game miserable to play
No,
so
but we
that
can
no
take
one wants to play
lessons
it.
from the past. We can absolutely take lessons from the past that worked before that are now lost. We've now lost.
You can always take lessons. It doesn't mean you uplift whole mechanics and transport them into a time period that there's no longer any context for. Just transporting passive moons into the modern age would be a disastrous move for Eve. Taking something and saying, hey, your space should mean more. Now, that I'm a huge fan of, because what was the thing with passive moons, right? Besides the mechanic, forget the mechanic for a little bit, think more abstractly. There was actually this meaning behind your space, because if you lost that, you immediately lost that moon income. If I come and take your space now,
Yeah, you needed solve for it to work.
you needed solve, right? So we talked
Okay,
to
yeah,
Boss
yeah.
recently. We talked to Boss recently, and they're getting dinged on by different groups up there in the north. And what do they basically do? They retreat back to their NPC stations, and they can still actually mine moons. They pointed this out. They can mine the moons where they are, and good for them, because they're a small group up there, fighting the blob, as it were. And good for them and their activity there, because they're making the best out of the current context of Eve. If we can do something to make your space matter more, make your solve and your ADMs matter more, and take that lesson from the past, I'd love that. Because right now, what you have when you think about the space that's out there, you have like about 3 tactical major points, right? You have TKE, you have Delve going west of the NPC space, and you have to a lesser extent Fountain. So like if we can do something to make that just more than to say, oh, these are good because of tactical gateways, like where the regionals and the jump zones are, and make each space something a little bit more distinct and meaningful, that would be cool.
Well, the problem is like Sov right now, the only thing Sov actually matters for is for Sino inhibs, being able to, you know, anchor Sino inhibs or keep Sino inhibs out. And it comes circles back to citadels, because you can take the Sov of a system and it doesn't matter if your enemy has 30 citadels in that system. You know, you could be the Sov holder all you want. It's going to take you a month to grind through those citadels. And that's what we did in the war against the Goons. You know, we took Sov, and 3 months later, we were still grinding citadels out of those systems that we had Sov on. You know, I think that you should make it so that if you lose Sov, maybe the citadels start to go into unanchor or just something.
Yeah, I have an idea about this. I feel like storms are a huge missed opportunity for inflicting limits upon structures in a system. I feel that a lot more than this needs to be done to restrict the number of structures that you would have in a system. But something I feel storms should have done from day one is it should have been like batten down the hatches, guys. A storm's coming. A load of structures are going to have some things affecting them adversely. And one thing I would do is, the storm is approaching. When the storm hits this system, you're only going to be able to have 3 citadels online. So if you don't want the game to choose that for you, you'd better go and offline everything in its path aside from your key strategic citadels.
And that could be kind of an interesting element. See, I'd be down with that. The idea of storms being something more significant, but moreover, the idea that
destabilizing areas.
Yeah, destabilizing activities. That's what I was looking for. Thanks. Yeah, I like the idea of destabilizing a region with an event, but not even just event-based stuff. Just having an increasing weight. So some people in chat were talking about how there's just way too many citadels in certain systems or certain regions, or make citadels more problematic. There are other, so just like we can look to Eve's Past for lessons, which I always agree with that. I'm just saying don't list mechanics. Don't look for mechanics, look for lessons. You can look also to other,
but okay.
I know, but you can look to other game franchises, and you can look to the theory that makes a lot of games work itself. You can look to these for lessons too, and the idea of an empire having an increasing cost bearing as you build it out is something extremely common. And for example, 4X games, why don't you sprawl and say, a Stellaris or Europa Universalis game? Why don't you just sprawl everywhere? Because there's a cost to doing so. Sometimes it's smart to do anyway, but you bear that cost. Now, you could argue, well, there's a cost to doing that in Eve because you have to defend the SOF, but it's not really. We all know that's a joke. You lose a SOF, you gain a SOF. You lose a SOF, you gain a SOF. All your edge systems are just buffer. What did Goon say during the early stages of Vietnam when they were unquestionably losing and unquestionably getting caved in? They just said, oh, that's just all buffer. That's just all buffer. So, and the reality was, they're right. Most of the time we spent
floodplains.
Yes.
If you judge taking everything surrounding their HQ as losing. I don't feel I want to comment on whether I regard that as losing or not, but okay.
It was a loss in the sense that they didn't have it anymore, and a lot of things went boom. Trillions of us changed hand. As far as how you want to perceive that as devastating or not is a matter of opinion. But my point here is that with the current setup and the current way things are done, we have such an entrenchment with the way Null is shaped, and in such an entrenchment with these larger groups. What we need is some we need something to cause some more cataclysms. We need something to cause some more upset in those areas, and we also need a punishment for empire building.
The trick is, it always comes back to any punishment you inflict on the blob is going to be felt 10 times worse by the small person.
That's how you.
That's not.
How? What punishment?
True.
What punishment would you put it? What punishment would you put in that wouldn't be felt by the little guy? Oh, you're gonna make it more difficult to organize your citadels. Oh, well, guess who has the manpower to actually handle that organization? The blob. Know who doesn't? The little corp that has 5 people all in the same time zone and can't wake up at Chinese time zone in order to defend it from
you're
a storm.
straw manning by singling out. Oh, so we're talking about a 5-man group. That's
or a 10-man group, or a 20-man group, or a 100-man group.
Right, well, there's a vast difference there, but you emoted by implying that 5-man group was the target. For
it doesn't matter. I mean, like, Fancy Pants is an 800-man corp, and we don't really have EU coverage. If you implemented some thing that made us get on at EU time zone, would we alarm clock? Yes. Would we hate it? Yes. But the groups that have the more people across the greater number of time zones, they're the ones who adapt to those changes the best and who feel it the least.
It is very difficult to punish blobbing, as it were, because whether
you can reduce their available funds and make it so that people who are punching above their weight get to keep larger funds, like I discussed, but
Well, you keep referencing these mechanics obliquely, like they're just going to be magically instated in such a way that the blob doesn't just do more of that. Make T3Cs as powerful way to punch up. Guess what the blobs do? They punch down with T3Cs. Bring in passive moons. the blob just takes all the moons or all the
Except
systems
that's
associated
not
to the
true.
moons.
Except that's not true.
But it is true. It is
no,
true.
no. That is absolutely not true. And
How is it not true?
And I'm going to be charitable by assuming that you just don't know how things worked for smaller groups, in low-sec, even with valuable moons that were close to null.
We're talking about nullsec. So you keep going back to this golden era of low-sec. Listen, I'm sorry low-sec sucks now, but you can't just make this broad sweeping generalization and say, but it worked in low-sec for this year, so it must be fine.
Oh, so you're saying don't make broad generalizations. That's rich.
Yes, that is actually exactly what I am saying to you.
Okay.
A big part of low-sec's viability in the days that you're talking about had to do with what had happened with passive moon mining and power consolidation in nullsec. Again, you can't just take mechanics out of their time and say, because of this mechanic, we had this magical and golden operating state.
Every single thing that is a problem in this game is connected to 20 other things. But we can't just, every time we talk about a problem, we can't just slap down advice and experience and intuition by saying, well, look at these other things it's connected to, so we can't.
No,
yes,
I think we all
together.
agree that we need some ideas in how to shake up the game and make it better. But what we need is good ideas, not just fishing in the barrel of the past and saying, "Oh, this worked once upon a time. Let's see if it works again."
It's not once upon a time. It was during
apply.
Eve's peak that it worked.
Once upon a time, almost a decade ago.
Right before that, there were these massive blocks, and when PL was the constant going around shit stomping new bro alliances.
I think you're looking at rose-tinted. I think you're looking at the past with rose-tinted glasses.
I remember those days. They were not as good as you think they were.
Or when PL, when PLFCs would, defy their alliance leader and be like, I'm going to go and shit stomp our allies because, we can, and we're PL and we've got the biggest super fleet. Oh, you guys want to join us? Yeah, no, fuck you guys.
There was a lot of power
being
consolidation.
Angry about having not been allowed to join PL. Is that what this is?
It's not that. It's just that having these apex groups that literally could go around and just completely murder anyone in the game and shit stomp everyone, that was the reason why big blocks started forming. That's why a bunch of new bros got together, started farming up their stuff together, and look, and now it's been a while. They now have Titans. They don't want to go into those, elite PvP groups. They want to kill them.
Yeah, you seem to forget that the origin of these big blocks, the origin of goons, is because they formed to counter the elitism that you would so desperately want to bring back. Goons very much formed as a counterweight to Bob.
You are painting my argument to be some kind of elite.
Oh my god, I can't handle this.
But you jump to these wild assumptions about and tell me what I mean by it.
Then tell me what you mean by you. So let me get this straight. You want to focus all of the wealth into the hands of a very few number of players. You want to bring it back.
Again. You're just doing it immediately.
That's a quote.
Again.
That is a literal quote that you said 15 minutes ago. Tell me I'm crazy here.
I did not say I wanted to force the wealth and power into the hands of a few elite people.
Can we bring up the recording from literally half an hour ago when you talked about bringing back passive moons so that you could have it in the hands of very few people?
We don't have that much tech on this show. Sorry.
Passive moons unquestionably take the wealth from the many and give it to the few. There is zero way to argue anything possibly different. How many systems are there in Eve? Anybody know that nerdy number off the top of your head? There's 64 regions. How many systems?
I would also like to point out, and sorry to interrupt you, but in PL, I was talking to Grath, and the way he talked about it was that, all these different PL members, they can have their own little passive moon mining operation, and, it would be like their own little farm, and if it got attacked, PL would, come down and defend it. So while I don't think Phantomite was trying to say that it took, the wealth of a few, the big wealth and put it in the hands of a few, I think he's more thinking of, okay, smaller. There are greater numbers of small alliances and small groups can exist, so that they can then take the moons.
What it comes down to is that PL existed, but so did groups of very many members. PL used fewer people, meaning that they could spend more money per person. The other large groups also had success in PvP, but they had to do it with cheaper ships because they were spreading it thinner.
Right, but they didn't really do SRP. That's the thing.
You also
how they did it. How they did
Yeah,
it
they were
was
spreading it thinner, so they didn't have SRP anywhere near the same level.
You also seem to forget that huge amounts of PL's wealth also came from Alliance tournament ships and winning Alliance tournament year over year over year, allowing them to pad their SRP wallet beyond just what, passive moon mining did.
Now that is a brand new conspiracy.
That's not a conspiracy. That's what they did.
That's absolutely what they did. Like, that's not a conspiracy.
It's what you
that's
like to think.
A matter of
they
history.
Did. It's what you like to think they did.
Who dispute this? Is honestly like genuinely the first time I've ever heard this disputed.
I'm
including talking to PL people at length.
Message graph right now. I'm actually kind of.
I don't think I've ever heard a PL veteran dispute this before. So I'm interested in this unique take on history.
Who, me?
Yeah. Well, why are you calling it a conspiracy theory when that's what happened?
I was in PL briefly as a line member, flying at most a carrier in size.
Okay.
I did not know carrier line members had, the inner workings of all the funding of the alliance to say that this.
How much do you think those things were being? How much were AT ships being sold for back then?
Hundreds of billions of ISK.
Not sort of 300-400 billion like they are now. Today's is an inflation, a huge inflation due to the amount of ISK.
Yeah, but that's all relative.
Mass ratting.
Ships were also cheaper. This is just like real world economics, right?
Yeah, it's still going for 100 billion ISK, which goes twice as far as it does today.
More than twice as far.
You also have to keep in mind that they were winning like 30 ships a time.
Yeah,
for
it was closer.
Year.
It was closer to between 30 to 80 billion. So it was like an order 4 times lower than previously. And if you think that that was seriously causing a noticeable amount of income to the alliance that went went to SRP rather than to the people mostly involved in the tournament, then you are massively wildly believing a conspiracy.
Let's just be generous and call it 50 billion. That's still 50 billion times 30 ships. That's 1.5 trillion ISK a year for multiple years.
You think was being spread amongst the members of the alliance through SRP?
Right,
not what you're saying.
No, it was being used to offset other costs for PL.
So I messaged Garth. I asked him. We'll see what happens.
Sure. I would love to hear Garth talk about it.
Hold on. I want to know exactly what you asked Grath in the wording of your question.
I'm having an argument on stream with Phantomite, and he's saying PL did not use the Alliance tournaments when he to help fund the Alliance. Is he right?
Well, of course they did. They used the ships to help. Of course they did. They sold some, but the question is the impact of it. The question is how many. So, like, if they sold, I don't know, less than 10, that's a big bit of money for some groups. But for someone like PL, that's like it's okay, but it's not this earth-shattering.
This is honestly a conspiracy theory that PL was successful because they won the AT.
That isn't that's
not what we're saying. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that it helped offset the cost of the alliance beyond just, passive moon mining was not the sole income stream. It was a part of the income stream of the alliance, among many other things, one of which being the alliance tournament ships.
Right.
I suppose that's valid.
Hell, break out Empires of Eve. I'm pretty sure there's even an entire chapter on it in Empires of Eve.
Large groups in Eve are going to be completely and utterly inevitable because you have two kinds of people that are going to be drawn to in deeper involvement in Eve. The followers who find it easier to group up and to get the kind of content and fun they want. And I'm not being pejorative here. I'm not calling them sheep or something like that. I just mean people who are going to follow in with a group because they find it easier to get that content and get the gratification they want from the successes of consolidation and the empire builders who are going to do that building, who are the followers they're going to gather around. You cannot make a magical mechanical change to change a human nature aspect. The reason you see it so starkly in Eve is because Eve allows it mechanically. What do other games do? They force you into 5x5 team. They make everything episode based, or they make everything locked off by doing pockets of activity. Multiple servers, sharding, all the crap that we say we hate about Eve, right? How many times have we complained about the abyssal or other type of entry points where you can't even interfere, you can't even get an opportunity to PvP people because they're stuck in a PvE pocket of dead space. So Eve allows for these mechanics, and you would have to fundamentally ruin that to say, oh, let's de-blob the game. There is no de-blobbing the game. Instead, what you need to do is you take lessons from Eve's history, lessons from other game franchises, and lessons from human psychology.
I just told a minute ago that I'm not allowed to take lessons from history.
No, we've said that multiple times.
We literally said take lessons, not mechanics. You want to take mechanics from 10 years ago and transplant them into
exactly.
today.
You can't take moon mining. Say, let's put passive moon mining into
picking how you go about these arguments.
What are you talking about?
You keep saying this. I don't think you're having the same conversation the rest of us are having.
I specifically said, and I quote, you can take lessons from the history of Eve. You can't lift entire mechanics and transport them out of time. Absolutely, you should take lessons from Eve's past about what worked and what didn't.
You just don't want to take these lessons that I've talked about. You don't like.
I don't want to take your mechanics. All you want to talk about is bringing mechanics forward, like passive moon mining. I don't want the mechanics. No thank you to passive moon mining. No thank you to the periods of elitism when a small few could control all of Nullsec. And if you don't think that happened, it's because you weren't aware of it.
Because that's totally different from how it is now.
There is more opportunity for a small group today to have a presence in Nullsec than there was during the era of passive moon mining.
I like local represent. Ish, you're cherry picking how to win every topic. Stop it.
More opportunity than ever. I'm sorry.
I mean,
Heroes.
We're doing pretty good.
Yeah, I gotta say, we're making billions and billions of ISK in Pochven. There's plenty of ways to make money in Eve. You just need to know where to find it. It's not the same as where it was in the past, and that's where people really get upset that they can't make money the same way anymore. But there are plenty of ways to still make money in the game.
Yeah, and the best of them are all clustered up with a bunch of huge numbers of people.
So
the road for small groups to go to Nullsec.
So I
got shit for years, and it's been consistently getting worse for the last half decade at least that I've been aware of it.
I think that's personal experience. We are doing better this year than we've done probably any year previous.
So do you guys want to hear?
Is in Pochven. You just said you're not in.
Do you guys want to hear Pat's response?
What was that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was his response?
Right. So it starts off with him saying he is wrong. We definitely use them to fund the alliance. We paid FCs with them as bonuses, and we'd sell a few now and then to keep afloat between money-making schemes.
To what extent is the question that was being asked there?
He said were AT ships used to help fund the alliance. And he said yes, they were used to help fund the alliance.
But I mean, I thought the discussion was more. There wasn't any denial that happened to some amount. It was the
Phantomite was denying it outright. Phantomite said that they didn't use it at all.
Another thing they said was, and of course we keep a few of each type because everyone we sold that died made the ones we kept more valuable.
Yeah, exactly.
Very valid. Yeah. Look. Here's the reality. 'Cause we can get into like trying to argue ancient economic methods all night, and none of us have actually the qualifications of the people who really were there. The reality is,
I mean, I was, but okay.
What were you running? Were you running PL's wallet, or were you a line member in a carrier? You got to pick here. You got to pick your history point for me.
You want me to specifically talk about PL when instead at the time I was one of the founding directors of Snuffed Out, and I helped with the everyday of the income of the fleet commanding.
Not really, because we don't really care about that. We're trying to find ways to help the game grow and help the game be more fun for everyone to play. I don't really care about any of that.
So you want an equal opportunities game?
And I think it's funny that one of the reasons, or not one of the reasons, one of the things that we say we don't like, like we said, different servers separating players out. That's kind of exactly what we got with Pochfin, and Pochfin's one of the most popular parts of the game right now. So at some point, you have to wonder: do Eve players even know what's good for them?
Did you say that Pochfin is in? Were you just implying Pochfin was instanced?
It's purely instance, but it is more instance than what Eve has really ever had in the past. You need to take a special filament, and they have made it, more laxed over time. Before, you also had to have standings. You still need to have standings in order to get into the home systems
no.
of
You were
Pochfin.
talking about Pochfin now.
Yeah,
Are you
okay.
saying that Pochfin is instanced?
That's not what I'm saying. Don't put words in my mouth. I am saying that Pochfin is a version of the game where it is separated out from the null block. You can't drop supers, you can't dread bomb. There are very, very, very limited number of
You can
caps that are
blob.
in
can blob.
passion. You can blob, but it is extremely difficult to blob because you can only get into Pochfin via 15-man filaments. So yes, you can blob by having a FC for every 15 line members, which is difficult. Even the larger groups do not have that many FCs. And we've done it to some success with small, like maybe 45-man fleets, but you're not talking 300-man fleets in Pochfin.
So are we saying
It's also wormholes. But
also the wormholes, but the wormholes require a team to be kept up to be
we
constantly
saying
scanning.
in that case that if the game was changed so that it required an escalating number of people capable of FCing as groups grew larger, that it would put a natural slowdown on super large groups?
Well,
but I don't think it would stop them at all.
It wouldn't stop it, but yeah, it would.
That's why I say
it would encourage. It would encourage smaller engagements.
A diminishing returns type thing.
I almost wish the wormholes into Pochfin didn't exist. I do wish that you could only get into Pochfin via the filaments, so you could only have these like 15-man squads flying around. I feel that would be a very interesting.
The problem is,
way to play.
well, I get you, but I can tell you from firsthand, you just take two 15-man groups and then you make a fleet when you get inside Pochfin.
But then you also have to keep in mind, though, with the Pochfin filaments, it dumps you into a system randomly. So yes, you can meet up, but that I feel is almost a fun gameplay. It's like, okay, I have my 15-man squad.
I hear you.
My friend's 15-man squad is 5 jumps away. We need to meet up, and we don't know if there's an enemy fleet in between us.
Great, so make the change wormholers have been asking for years and make wormholes more volatile. Because when wormholes close...
not that I don't believe you, but I'd like to hear from a wormholer that that's what they've been asking for.
I've heard this from several wormhole groups
okay,
about the idea of
varying
volatility to wormholes to actually make it a lot more chaotic for large groups to move around in them. That would actually be an interesting mechanic where you don't have wormholes that allow for massive fleets to roll through. So what if the only way into Pochfin, conversely to the filament idea, was through these wormholes that you have to scan through? And then what if they were so volatile that you couldn't get large numbers of fleets through them at a time? Then you get that gameplay of separation. You can still blob on the other side if you've got the coordination to do it. But this comes back to, do you have the FCs to get those isolated groups back together? That could be kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah. I don't know. I still prefer the filaments over the wormhole approach, though, just because I don't want to make it so tedious that it becomes you're spending more time getting to the fight than actually fighting. Like, that's always been something I try to avoid, is making it so that traveling to a fight is so difficult and takes so long that the more casual Eve players lose interest and stop playing. Because why would I go 30 jumps to get into a 5-minute fight when I can just boot up League of Legends or something else and get that that gratification much sooner? And don't get me wrong, delayed gratification is a huge part of Eve, and the whole idea of setting up that awesome bait and getting that awesome kill is definitely a payoff. But I think for the average line member flying in a Munin in an alliance fleet, they need that payoff a little bit more. Otherwise, they're just going to stop playing the game. They're not going to play the game the way you want them to play it. They're just going to stop outright. And I think that's ultimately a loss for the game.
I think that you have to find that sweet spot between delayed gratification and theme park.
Yes, it's very difficult, and I don't want to go too far in that direction too, because it is a slippery slope. It is a fine line to walk. But I think our ultimate goal is to have the most number of players playing the game having the most amount of fun. And I think in order to do that, you need to diversify the wealth out to those players so that they can buy cool ships and they can fly cool ships.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think you need to give them reasons to get in those ships and fight each other with them.
Oh, also, they're all gone. PL has no AT ships to speak of anymore.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I've heard a few people say that, which I find very believable. It's been a few years.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting. We got to get Grath on the show someday. That would be an interesting. He has some interesting slices of history. That said, our Corp in-house tournament starts in 10 minutes, so I'm supposed to be doing some something or other for it. So I have to boat my way out.
Yes, I do as well. Excellent discussions, Phantomite.
Thank you, as ever.
Always a pleasure. Few people I'd rather argue with.
So you want to buy some pyrite?
It's all done with love, Phantomite.
Well, if we weren't debating, it wouldn't be an interesting show, would it?
I wouldn't give a crap about Eve if I didn't have a way to argue about it. All right.
Anyway, Ish, you want to close? I'll close. Unless, do you want to close this out?
Close us out, sir.
All right. Hey, if you guys are enjoying the show, New Eden Post streams Eve-related content throughout the week. One of those being Trash Talk Tuesday on Tuesday. I think we're still doing Trash Talk Thursday. I don't know. Sometimes Serious Slander Saturday, but between two Keepstars, we're always here. But yeah, if you enjoy the content, be sure to hit that follow button, and if you extra like the content, maybe hit that subscribe button. Maybe throw us a few Bezos bucks. We definitely enjoy it. Yeah, remember, always bubble wrap your Keepstars, and we'll see you guys next time on Between Two Keepstars.
Bye.